Hello, everybody. Welcome to another episode of the ICIJ Podcast, La Coalición. I'm really excited to be here with my colleagues today. This is the second episode of our legislative policy series. This is going to be called Legislative Process, so let's get into it.
Did you guys see Kendrick's concert in LA for Juneteenth? Yeah. And he brought out Dr. Dre. You said you were trying to get tickets for it.
I was trying to get tickets for it. It was really hard to get tickets. I was down to throw a band on it, but couldn't happen. Kendrick's one of my favorites. TDE, Top Dog, one of my favorite groups.
Is that a rap group?
Well, it's a label. Yeah, they have a lot of rappers like Schoolboy, Absol, J-Rock, a whole bunch of other really talented LA-based artists. So bummed it, but it was Juneteenth, so we barbecued. My wife invited her family over. We watched it outside on the TV. It was a lot of fun.
Oh, they did like a live stream for it?
Yeah, it was on Amazon Prime. But yeah, yeah, it was on Amazon.
Let's go to break. Did we go to break on this show?
And yeah, it was a good time though. Barbecue, so can't complain. Yeah.
Well, I don't understand what the significance of him bringing Dr. Dre out, because everyone was like, "Oh, this is like the last. Like this is really putting Drake like underground."
Like the last nail in the coffin.
Yeah.
I mean, not necessarily, right? I think that the overall significance of that event is bringing out all the West Coast legends and mostly like LA Compton-based legends. So just the fact that he had an OG there from the very beginning of hip hop said a lot. And he introduced Not Like Us. So he got into the mic and said, "Psst, I see dead people," and then the song started.
Oh, okay,
so he's the one that set that off.
So it's like They're With Me.
Yeah. Yeah.
Okay. And you have zero interest, Esme.
Well, I mean, I know what's going on. My partner, like, will not stop talking about it. He makes me watch the videos with him. And, like, I understand what's happening. But, like, it just gets annoying if you listen to the same song 100 times a day. So, like, it's cool. It's a good song. But
yeah.
Please, let me listen to something.
Not Like Us is the song you're talking about. Yeah. No, definitely. Okay, then we should definitely get into this. That's a perfect segue. So last episode, we introduced this policy series for La Coalición Podcast, where we talk about the basic structures of government, the ways in which bills become law, all of that good stuff. And we spent a lot of time just talking about the levels of government that exist now via the elections that are coming up this November, all the things we're going to be voting on when it comes to president, the Senate, Congress, all of that. And so we thought that a good idea to present everything that we talked about last episode would be to use a real example, and a real example of how it works climbing up that ladder of government. And what better than to talk about one of ICIJ's most important efforts right now. We anchor the Shutdown Adelanto Coalition. This is a coalition that is fighting for the closure of an ice processing center in Adelanto, which is a city in the high desert in California. And Esme is here with Eddie as well to talk a little bit about the background of this coalition, what they're fighting for, and how it relates to the overall process of creating law in this country.
Cool. So I think before we even talk about like the coalition and the efforts, I think it's really important to recognize a lot of the work that's been done by folks, even when when the processing center first opened back in 2011. So, the coalition did formally start in 2018, but folks have been doing advocacy, doing post-release work, been attempting to work with the city for the closure of this facility way before we started to do it, before the coalition started to do it. And so, in 2020 was the expansion of the facility. So this is when the contract got put on the table, and the city really had an opportunity to make change, take initiative. Yeah, so unfortunately the city did choose to vote the voting was neutral, right? But then deals happened and they decided to move forward with the expansion, and there was lots of engagement with the coalition and folks going out to council meetings, advocating for the closure. But there was also the opponent side also going to the council meetings and also lobbying and doing advocacy. So alongside the coalition and directly impacted folks and high desert residents who were organizing for the shutdown, there was also the private prison corporation that was also advocating at the same time. So we know that both groups do it. We know everybody does it, and we know it's effective because everybody does it, because it works in one way or another. I wasn't with the coalition at the time, but yeah, were you part of it? No, right? Not yet?
No, I joined 3 years ago.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. But yeah, I don't know what else to add in there. Do you want to add any other little piece?
Well, I can talk a little bit about the legislative aspect of all this work, right? And like you mentioned, Esme, folks have been doing this work since the beginning in 2011. And when we came in 2018 to anchor this space, we had the resources to really hone in and organize folks, build up leadership, and organize council meetings, town halls, awareness, education around shutting down this facility, why it's important. So that started at the local level, right? So a lot of the work in the beginning was working with the council. We had a champion in Stefana Evans, who was a council member of Adelanto, who was our only ally there and was the only one that voted against the expansion of this facility. And we unfortunately lost her a couple of years ago in the re-election campaign.
Not lost her.
Well,
she's still around.
She's still around, but we lost her in the re-election campaign. She lost. So that didn't necessarily stop our work advocating within the city council. With the mayor, we have continued to do work with the mayor and with the other council members there, whether it's for this issue or for other issues, because the work that we're doing in Adelanto, it's intersectional. It's not just about the shutdown of Adelanto detention facility. It's about improving the water quality. It's about bringing economic development to the region. So we're doing all of these other pockets of work around ICIJ, around other community spaces that impact the likelihood of shutting down Adelanto detention facility. And in this journey, since 2018, we've talked to assembly members, senators, engaged with the governor's office, and now we recently engaged with congressional members in D.C. So maybe we can talk a little bit about how that work has looked over the last couple of weeks with D.C.
Oh, yeah. So it's really important to also put in the context of what's been happening this past year, right? So back in December, we got word that the Biden administration and DHS had decided to put Adelanto on a short list for potential closure due to litigation that's going on. So that's where really our advocacy took another level, even though we have been interacting with congressional folks and doing advocacy with our congressional members for a while, specifically for folks that were in detention or post-detention or just supporting folks through their their process of release. We took our advocacy to a new level where we wanted our congressional reps and allies to take a stand to shut down the facility, right? So this is where our champion Judy Chu from LA authored and circulated a letter for the shutdown. We got 23 signatures, including Judy Chu's, and this was ranging with reps from NorCal to Central California to San Diego. So it was a really diverse group of reps. I think in total it was 46% of reps that signed on, of California reps, that signed on. And so since then, there's been several letters even done by folks outside of the state in support of Adelanto. And so, we realized that our congressional folks are interested, and they do have the power to also intervene with what's going on with Adelanto. So that's where we ended up going to DC. Our team, along with the Shutdown Adelanto Coalition, went to DC to do a lot of these in-house visits with folks on the Hill. So I'll pass it back to y'all because I know y'all were leading and championing that work. So
Definitely. Well, let's take a step back before we go up that high in the ladder to Congress. Let's talk about the different levels. Again, obviously this fight is for closing this ICE processing center in Adelanto, and that fight to close that center involves a lot of different decision makers, a lot of different stakeholders. So to bring it to that, what we talked about last episode, which is this structure of government and this ladder that you have to move up to get policy through. But let's bring it to that. So the Adelanto City Council, you have Mayor Gabriel Reyes. Do we love her? Do we hate her? We don't have to do this for all of them.
It's a work in progress.
Okay. Council members, Upper Grove, Meza, and Jeanette. Now, does Adelanto have a district council race or citywide?
It's citywide.
Citywide, okay.
Yeah.
And then the city manager is obviously in charge of doing the actual executing of what the city council approves. So when the city council approves a budget, when it approves a new policy, it goes to the city manager, and they're the ones that are actually they're doing the day-to-day, right? Making sure that the things that are being passed are actually being implemented in the city. So then that's the most, I wouldn't say the lower level, but it's the most immediate level. The most accessible level to a community is always going to be the city council. Going up from there, you have state representatives, assembly. So you have Assembly Member Juan Carrillo and Senator Scott Wilk. And so that level of government is California state, right? So we have, obviously people know Congress, where we have a House and we have a Senate. We talked about that last episode. But within each state, you also have that same kind of structure of government. You have a representative that is usually an assembly member. Some states it's called a delegate, all kind of the same thing. Here it's an assembly member, and you have a senator as well. So the only difference there is that senators represent bigger districts, and they do so for longer periods of time typically than an assembly member. And the same thing for the House. In the Senate, U.S. senators represent the entire state. Every state gets 2 U.S. senators, and then you have House representatives, and that's a form of just making it more accessible to people. You know, it's more accessible if this Congress member represents me and only a couple of thousand other people, as opposed to a couple millions of other people in the state, right? And then moving on from there, we have Governor Gavin Newsom, so that's still at the state level, right? And then going to what we're talking about in D.C., we didn't visit this person, obviously, because we don't like them, but Congressman Jay Obernolte, who is the person who represents the city of Adelanto, or the city of Adelanto is within his congressional district. And then Senators Alex Padilla and LaFonza Butler. So then those are like all of the levels of government that represent the city of Adelanto, which is this small city in the high desert, at all different points in our structure of government. So can you talk to us a little bit about how engagement goes with all of these points? Like, we can start with the city council, you know, what kind of engagement started there, and then how did that go to the assembly members or senators or the governor, and then eventually to our trip to DC?
Yeah, I can start. I think that before you even start engaging with an elected official or the different legislative branches and ladder, you have to identify who is a decision maker, who is a stakeholder, who is a power holder. So initially it was a city, right? So there was a lot of work being done and talking to and engaging with candidates to be new council members, etc., with Adelanto. But after the contract was removed from Adelanto and given directly from ICE and Geo Group, the city still has a lot of work that they can do, and we're working on that currently with the ordinance. But the ultimate decision isn't up to Adelanto anymore. It's between ICE and Geo Group, right? So that, and because of what happened in December, pivoted us to focus more on the federal side of things, right? But up in this journey, we engaged with Juan Carrillo, who you mentioned was the assembly member for Adelanto and other parts of the Antelope Victor Valley region. He wrote a letter of support for HEAL. So this is where they come into play, right? Is also the mayor of Adelanto wrote a letter of support for HEAL too. So, and people might be wondering, what does the letter do? Is just a letter? How is that policy, right? Well, it can influence a decision maker. It can influence the governor in signing the budget, including $5 million for HEAL, knowing that the city and the assembly member are both in support of this. Politically, it makes things easier to pass through when you have people signing on and saying, I support this. So that's why letters of support are important, and they're part of the legislative process, and it's an easy way for folks to get involved, whether it's a community org like us, or it could be an individual. It could be a combined collective letter of support, etc. That's part of the legislative process, and this is how we've engaged with Assemblymember Juan Carrillo around HEAL. And when we engaged with our DC representatives, they were really interested in doing something federally around HEAL as well. So that was really cool for us because it validates some of the work that we're doing here, that it resonates not just with the local folks, but also other communities across the country that are, wow, okay, that's a good way to look at the solution around shutting down a facility. So hopefully later down the line, maybe this year or next year, we can talk about a federal just transition heal kind of program. But it all started locally. So that's the point I'm trying to get to, is that, and this is also coming from somebody that worked for a representative, that the best kind of policy comes from the people that are directly impacted, right? So the folks that are currently detained, people that have been released, they were part of our meetings in DC, and not only can they talk about the conditions and everything that happened to them inside, but they can talk about the solutions too. And those solutions are best informed by the folks that are in those communities directly impacted. And that's what we're trying to carry within all of our work that we're doing, legislatively, advocacy, organizing wise. It's all baked in together.
Right. Yeah. And that's like so applicable to anything, right? And if it's any kind of need that you see in your community, whether it's the toxicity that the ice processing center presents to like the overall environment of Atlanta, right? Any kind of need that you see, it's going through this, like you said, starting at the local level, starting with your local elected officials, your city council, your mayor, your city manager, and if that's outside of the realm of things that they have control over, then you go to the next step, which is going to your state assembly member, going to your state senator, starting a coalition like SDA, or just getting a group of community members to sign on to a letter of support. This is something that we need in our community. We're supporting this because, and you send that over to your local representatives. And if that's outside of their realm, then you move up to the next step, which is going to your federal representatives, your Congress member, your U.S. senator. And bringing whatever kind of need it is to your community, thinking of it as a policy change, thinking of it as something that can be accomplished through policy, and something that needs to be taken through this legislative journey, right? This process of passing policy at all of these levels of government.
The one thing I'll add as well is that we didn't mention the county, right?
Definitely.
But that's because we haven't engaged with them on this issue around shutting down the facility, and they're not necessarily a main decision maker around the facility. So that just to highlight, there's steps and escalation, right? When we have to go to a congressional member around the facility, the conditions, etc. But we skipped the county for a reason.
But for like unincorporated areas, right? Like Moscow, Bloomington, that's where the county oversees, right? So that's where those folks go to their MAC meetings, and that's their directly like representing officials. So then, yeah, I just wanted to put that there. Yeah.
And that reminds me too that like we don't really focus a lot on school boards and water boards as well. But maybe we can have a discussion about this at a later episode around how these are where the future congressional members are being cooked up at, right? That's the incubator where folks will target a cheaper seat because you don't need to spend $1 million to be a school board member, but you can work your way up there, maybe go to a city council after that, and then potentially later down the line a congressional or assembly member. And then these people become career-long politicians, supervisors when they retire, etc. But that's another level that we haven't directly engaged with because they don't necessarily have a main power or decision ability around Adelanto.
Yeah, definitely. And I know a lot of these can start to get confusing when you have all of these different offices and all of these different levels of government. For anyone who's actually interested in trying to find if they have a need in their community, if there's something that they're policy-wise they're interested in pushing through, Google is your best friend. Who's findmyrepresentative.com. You can find everyone who represents you, and they're all associated to different things. If there's something that you see that is in your kids' education curriculum, that you need to go to your school board to talk about that, right?
Oh my God, guess what I saw this morning? I'm sorry.
On that piece.
Guess who I saw that wants to do like a law for like that was inspired by their child. Jenny 69 wants to pass a law to have like cameras in classrooms since her child's autistic. Okay. And I was like, wow, like you see like these needs, these wants that communities like are advocating for comes from their experience, and it's really interesting to see how like everyone could really do it, right?
Yeah.
Like
So Jenny 69, if you're listening to this podcast, you need to. She says she's from Riverside, right? You need to go to your Riverside school board trustees, and then you need to go to your Riverside City Council, and you need to get this through.
I will say that Jenny also said that if you're in this country, you need to speak English. So take that for what you will. But that also came out of her mouth.
Okay.
So yeah. We're
so
dragging everybody.
Do not go through any of the
We're dragging
steps
everybody
that we've
here.
just given you.
Don't matter.
Stop listening to this podcast. Do not take our advice. This is all bad advice. We don't know what we're talking about.
I was gonna say something. Tomorrow is the freaking presidential debate.
Yes.
Are you guys gonna watch that?
I am gonna watch it.
We should stream it.
We should stream it, but it's gonna be like on traditional TV, which I don't have anymore.
I don't either. I'll stream it. I'll find a link.
I have Fire Stick, so like I could watch anything. You know?
Oh yeah, one of those.
Yeah.
Not a regular Fire Stick. Okay.
Yeah.
Oh.
Those are the kinds you can just buy. Yeah. It's all good, but I was gonna make a drinking game out of it. I'm still trying to work out the kinks, but based on what they say repetitively all the time, me and Heather are gonna have a good time. But my point is, in this legislative process, there's the executive, and we talked about that in the first episode. And the president just announced an executive order not too long ago around providing humanitarian parole in place for spouses of immigrants. So folks that have been in this country for a long time, spouses, they can stay in this country without having to step outside of this country and potentially risk never coming back, to expedite their process in getting a permanent residency, a green card, or citizenship, right?
Right. And real quick, just for context, usually that is the process that if you're trying to adjust your status, you would have to go back to your country of origin, complete the process there, and then you're allowed to come back as a U.S. citizen. Yeah. But parole in place essentially means you're able to do that in place here where you're already residing.
Yeah, and that's an executive order that Biden made, right? And he could have made this 4 years ago, by the way. But he chose to do it now.
Do you think it has something to do with what's coming in a couple months?
Maybe with this debate coming up, or maybe in November, right? So, again, when we're talking about this legislative process, it's not this pure, uncut. It's a very political maniac, right? It's a machine that operates under climates, pressure from political allies, opponents, etc. So because I think, this is just my analysis, I think that Biden felt pressure to do something good for once and support the communities that have been supporting him and got him elected, decided to do this thing now as opposed to 4 years ago, when it could have been, so many people could have benefited from the beginning, and now even this gesture can be taken away from folks if Trump is elected. Mm-hmm. But then that again puts the pressure on people to support Biden, which is what he's asking for and needs.
But it's such a conflicting, because not, maybe 2 weeks before that, he'd had another executive order to not allow folks at the border to, be able to come in. So then it's such a conflicting thing, right? He's trying to appease one side, and he's also trying to appease conservatives. Mm-hmm. So it's just very, it's
a very Democrat thing to do.
Mm-hmm. And all of this to say that we have a system, as imperfect as it is, that would make this so much smoother, and that's actually electing people to Congress to do their job and actually pass laws, as opposed to having something as precarious as an executive order, because then it's okay, this is in place now, this is not official law. If somebody else is elected and there's a change in administration, they want that's being erased, Whereas if you have a congressional member introducing a law, you have other members who are actually doing their job and debating and creating policy and passing it, then you have something that's more concrete. You have an actual system in place to have a pathway for citizenship for spouses. And all of that goes back to all of our conversation here, which is essentially the ways in which we need to be active in policymaking and all of the systems and the structures that are really available to us, as long as we're knowing of them and we're also taking action to pressure them.
Yeah, and I think it's important to also mention that we do our best to work within the confines of this legislative process, this ugly thing that we just have in this country. But we also, from time to time, work around it and outside of it, where we can come up with more creative solutions, right? And we exercise our First Amendment rights all the time by protesting, and we had a rally in DC to express those rights as well. And if you don't express and flex those rights, they will be taken away eventually.
Jay Obernolte, if you're listening, shut down Adelanto.
Yeah.
You have to. You're done.
Yeah. We're working on him and also Calvert and other folks in the region that are congressional members that have been in power for such a long time that have never really felt the pressure from the community, and that's hopefully going to change soon.
Yep, exactly. Okay, so thank you for that conversation on that. Now we can move on to something that's a little bit more fun. I want to talk about what we're hot and what we're cold on. So what we're obsessing over right now or what we're hating. And Esme, I think you want to kick us off.
Oh, you know what? You know what's really hot? Perfect Match. Season 2. We just, y'all know.
I haven't heard of this one. It's trash TV, and I like trash TV, but what's it about?
So, okay, think of all the reality shows on Netflix. Okay. The dating ones are like, you know, they do crossovers of like all the hottest ones, and like they have to like get a partner, and so it's like a dating show, and it's like it's just so much drama. Yeah, it's fun to watch.
Is that the one where they get to pick who dates who? Like if they win a competition? Okay, I've heard of it. One, yeah. Okay, I'll check it out. I'm watching Fallout right now, so when I finish it.
What's Fallout?
Oh, it's based on a video game series, but essentially it's kind of based in the 1950s. Nuclear fallout happens all over the world, and then people are living in bunkers. So these people think that the world is something totally different than what's on the surface. And on the surface, you have like all kinds of crazy stuff going on. It's really good. It's on.
So that's really good.
Yeah, it's really good. It's on Amazon Prime. Sorry.
Stop.
Yeah.
You're exposing yourself.
Another
hot cold Amazon Prime.
I have a fire stick.
Well, my cold is Amazon. That's who I know. I don't know if I'm hot or I'm cold on this, but I saw the last episodes to Bridgerton, which I'm not heavily invested in. I casually watch it because my boyfriend watches it. So if I'm in the room while it's playing, I'll sit down. But this season actually has made me like actually sit down and watch it, which I have enjoyed. But there's something about this kind of like, I don't know. I think it's just romantic dramas. It's like, you know what's going to come into the end, and we're spending 5 episodes fighting and not fighting and having sex and then falling in love and then falling out of love and then all these things just for the end to then get married. And it's the same storyline for all of the characters. So I'm hot on that. I'm interested, but I'm cold in that I don't want more shows like this.
Yeah. A show reminds me, one of the trash TV shows reminds me of that, what you just described. What's it called, Esme? It's on Netflix. Love is Blind is like that, where I will fast forward to the end to see if they are getting married or not. Yeah. Like the last couple episodes are so kind of drawn out. I'm just like, let's get to the point here.
Yeah.
But for me, it's soccer. So right now there's 2 tournaments, right? There's the CONMEBOL, so in North America, South America.
You said what?
The name of the tournament? CONMEBOL, whatever it is. Mm-hmm. Anyways, Mexico is playing.
You're talking about La Copa?
La Copa.
Eddie.
I think the league is called CONMEBOL. Oh. Yeah, the league. Yeah.
Like the organizers.
Oh. Yeah. So my bad. And then the Euro Cup is going on too. Okay, so Mexican. I wasn't really invested in the tournament because I know Mexico's team isn't really that good. But I'm watching the game. I think it was Saturday, and I was so freaking invested into it. And I knew that our team was going to suck, and we pulled it out. We pulled it to victory. So I'm hot about that, but I'm cold about playing Argentina and the other super amazing teams
I was
going to
say, you have more to be invested in. I'm Peruvian. We played, I think it was last week or 2 weeks ago, which we didn't lose. It was 0-0, so that's not bad. We played against Chile. But you have way more to be invested in if you think Mexico is a bad team.
Wait, is there going to be like a rematch?
I don't know.
No, they're in groups, so they play the other teams in their group.
Yeah. I just watch when Peru plays, and even then I don't know why I'm watching.
All right.
But okay, thank you very much.
Thanks, everybody. Catch you at the next one.